What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Points Per Podcast. My name is Eric. That's my co-host Will. And today we're going to be running through some of the best and worst fantasy football values. And we're going to go division by division. So this is going to be a series of videos. We're going to go through every team eventually. But today we're focusing on the AFC West. We recently had David Njoku sign with the Chargers. I feel like that sparked a lot of debate in the best ball community and the dynasty community about some of the values on that team. And so I thought that was a good place to start. But I'm excited for this one. Will, how you feeling?
Hey man, feeling good. Some people's first time, my first time really taking a look at these rosters since the draft and just seeing, all the different movements and whatnot. So definitely going to be an interesting video.
Absolutely. Super excited for it. Also, we're going to be looking at this from a couple different perspectives. I think Will kind of took this and ran with it from a dynasty perspective. I was looking at it more from like the best ball and potential redraft perspective. We'll mix these ideas in as we go throughout the videos, but I think it'll make for a good kind of either end of the spectrum when we go through each team. So I'm ready to get this started. You ready, Will?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. So I'm going to pull up another screen here. And I can switch between, we have keep trade cut up for the dynasty and we have the best ball as well. And also depth charts if we need to get to that. But we'll start with the Chargers, like I said, off the top, and I'll let you lead us off. Who's your favorite target from this team?
My favorite target is probably one of the more expensive targets for this team. Obviously, Amari Hampton is a big buy for me going into this season, like a gigantic buy, and mostly because of Mike McDaniel. If we just want to get in a little bit of details, Mike McDaniel, to many people, myself included, is the best run game coordinator in the league, hands down. Kyle Shanahan himself has even credited him as the best run game designer he's ever worked with. And we've seen that just sort of turn into a lot of great fantasy seasons, back from Alfred Morris back with Washington back in the day to the countless 49ers running backs who have just produced over time. Raheem Mostert year after year, including with the Dolphins. And most lately, Devon Achane, who ended up getting the payday off of it as well. Mike McDaniel is just amazing for run game. He was able to bring people to the team to help bolster the run game as well. That interior offensive line has gotten a lot better in this past offseason. He's brought in fullbacks, people that he wanted. And honestly, even last year, Amari Hampton was one injury short of a breakout in a Greg Roman offense. So I feel like looking at this one now, it's just wheels up absolutely.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it might be wheels up across the board. Amari Hampton is absolutely somebody that I'm into, really from any perspective, like across all different formats. But I was looking at a couple different guys. So we'll switch over to the best ball ADP. One of them is Justin Herbert. Let me command F here so we can find him in the rankings. But just as you talked about with Amari Hampton, here he is at 84. The Mike McDaniel bump is going to help everybody in this offense. And I think the offensive line health is going to help everybody in this offense as well. It's going to have a big impact on Amari Hampton. It's going to have a big impact on the amount of time that Justin Herbert has to throw and his health personally too, because he was battling through a bunch of injuries last season and even the season before. I think it's going to give the offense more time to have plays develop and things of that nature. And this is just a really talented group that he has around him right now. So probably the best offensive coordinator he's ever had, probably the most talent he's ever had around him. And we know how talented Justin Herbert is as well. He started to show off the ability to, extend plays with his legs last year a little bit more. If we can continue that, plus get the passing bumps, I think it's going to be a huge season for Herbert.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And just to add on to what you said, where it's wheels up for everybody, another big dynasty buy I've got going into this offseason is Ladd McConkey.
Yeah,
I believe, last year kind of drove his value way down. People forget, I guess, that his rookie season, he was the wide receiver 13, and going into the last year is the wide receiver 30. So quite a big drop, and I understand the apprehension. But again, that was in a Greg Roman offense. This is one where Mike McDaniel has kind of hinted to us over and over again that he is going to be one of the engines for this offense. I could see him being used for a lot of short yardage stuff. They plan to use his separation ability against man to create those mismatches and to get that, yak ability that Ladd McConkey does have. And also, like we said, the offensive line should not be anywhere near as bad as it was last year. They were injury ridden, just a lot of bad luck for the Chargers offense, really. And again, like we said, this is ran by Mike McDaniel, who has said time and time again he is going to be a great fit for this offense. He's also said that Quentin Johnston reminds him of Julio. I'm not really going that far, but I think when it comes to guys who are going to be big driving forces for this offense, just because of the style of play and just sort of the sure-handedness that Ladd McConkey's shown, I think he's going to be a huge focal point of this offense. But I also want to add with the caveat that with David Njoku there now, I think that does drive the touchdown ceiling down for the wide receivers a little bit. But in terms of just usage, getting the ball down the field and this being a high-octane offense, I think they're going to be rolling for sure.
Okay. So I'm interested to talk about the David Njoku point. I think maybe we'll save that for a little bit later. But Ladd McConkey specifically, love him as a dynasty buy. Although I do think I'd probably take him over Rome Odunze. I think the guys that he's around, I think is pretty reasonable. But I also had him on my list of best ball and potential redraft buys. And I don't know if you mentioned it while I was kind of messing around trying to find him on Keep Trade Cut. But a big thing for him this year, I think, is going to be the scheme change. Not just general McDaniel offense getting better, but the Chargers last year ran 3 wide receiver sets 81% of the time. The Dolphins last year only did that 53% of the time. That represents the biggest difference between any team's new play caller versus the previous year in terms of the usage of 3 wide receiver sets. It's like a 28% difference. And this is something that Ryan Heath just put out an article about, and I've seen a bunch of people talking about in the fantasy space that I think is really apt right now. But wide receivers score 32% more fantasy points when fewer than 3 wide receivers are on the field. And so if Ladd McConkey is on the field in 2 or less wide receiver sets, his efficiency is going to go through the roof, plus just the general offensive improvements that we're going to see under Mike McDaniel compared to Greg Roman last year. So I think there's potential for Ladd McConkey to have a JSN-esque leap this year. It might not be the highest probability thing, but it's within the range of outcomes. And it's somebody that, especially in this format where he's going around Bucky Irving, I guess, I'm really into Luther Burden, but Devontae Adams, DJ Moore, I definitely want him over some of these guys.
Absolutely agree. 100%.
All right. Let's go to avoids on this team. Who do you want to start us with?
So I guess one that I think, I'm not sure if he's an avoid, but he's someone that I think is going to be fool's gold for just a little bit. I think people are very high on Oronde Gadsden going into this year. I don't dislike Oronde Gadsden. I think he's still going to be a good part of this offense. I just don't think he's going to be as big as people think he's going to be, especially with David Njoku there now.
Yeah, so I can see that perspective, and I think that this is actually going to make for an interesting discussion because my avoid is David Njoku.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
I think based off of what we saw last year from Njoku, I think he's kind of washed, man. He was definitively outplayed by Harold Fannin, and I get that they play different positions in a sense, David Njoku is more of your traditional inline wide tight end, whereas Harold Fannin is more of kind of an F flanker slot guy. Doesn't block as well, as more pure receiving. But I think that he was definitively outplayed. David Njoku, specifically to him, his yards per route run has dropped in each of the last 3 seasons, all the way down to 1.06 last year. And with the NFL clearly starving for tight ends right now, this uptick in teams talking about 3 tight end sets and multi-tight end sets just in general. And we saw it in the NFL draft with how many teams were pushing tight ends up the draft board that we might not have expected. The fact that he didn't sign until mid-May for a pretty modest contract isn't the most, encouraging to me for what we should expect from his usage. And then in terms of tight end competition on the team, Njoku isn't the best blocker. They already signed Charlie Kohler from the Ravens. And he isn't the best receiver at that position, considering they already have Oronde Gadsden. That's not to say that he's not going to have an impact on snap share for all of those guys. I'm not saying that I'm specifically targeting Oronde Gadsden either. He gets a little bit more interesting if his price gets depressed because of David Njoku, but I just think they might all kind of cannibalize each other, and I'm not sure that Njoku is going to be the winner out of the group.
I think that's kind of where I'm coming from, is that there's so many different options in that. I don't see where there's a lot of space for Oronde Gadsden to at least be elite right now. But again,
That's
this is
fair.
it's just a 1 year deal for David Njoku, so I don't think it's going to be something huge going into the
Yeah,
future. I just think for this year, things may get at least a little gross in terms of the tight end room.
I think that's completely reasonable, and I fully get that. All right, you want to move on to the Ravens, or is there anybody else you want to talk about from the Chargers?
Raiders, but yes.
Raiders. Did I say Ravens? What am I
Yeah.
doing?
All good.
To
I
the
did the same thing.
Raiders. Yeah, you want to lead us off here?
Yeah, man. So there's somebody who I could see both sides of the argument for. I'm going to talk about Brock Bowers here. And for me, he's going to be a buy. And I'm interested in your take on this as someone who did actually just sell Brock Bowers in the league this year, too, because I can 100% see that side of things as well. So I'm going to talk from the buy side of things, and we're going to have a little bit of discussion here. But in my opinion, I think this is the only time he's really going to be really sellable in a league in terms of his value, trying to acquire him, and also just people wanting to get off of him at the moment as well with just team outlook. But because when you look at him last year, his targets were trending down. Even if he had played the entire season, he still would have had less targets than he would have had his rookie season, where we know he broke records and he was a great tight end. So that does kind of drive things down when you look at it. But I think he also, last year, he led all tight ends with 715 short yards, which just kind of shows how good he is when you do get the ball in his hands and make him make something happen. I think there's no doubt there at all in terms of the talent for Brock Bowers. I also think that, injury is really the only thing that slowed him down. And that just feels kind of like a speed bump and not so much like a brick wall. It's just something that it's not going to be something indicative of what he's going to be in the future. I think it was just something that hampered him going in the last year. And I think he's always going to be a positional advantage as long as he's on this team. And he is the best player on this team on offense for sure. So with the coaching change with Kubiak there, I think he's one of those guys that can get more creative and someone who can take a Brock Bowers and move him all over the field. Like, I wouldn't even be surprised to see this guy lining up in the backfield to take some snaps. And
Yeah.
and I think with just that sort of versatility he brings, more touches is just going to mean more points. And, going forward, he's going to be a guy who is going to be a cornerstone for the Raiders itself, but could also be a cornerstone for a lot of fantasy teams.
I couldn't agree with you more. From either perspective, he's on my target list from a best ball and kind of redraft focus perspective as well. You mentioned that I traded him in Dynasty. I hated doing it. I love Brock Bowers. I'm in a full rebuild teardown situation. I'm trying to get all the points off my team, and so I felt like I had to sell for some future picks. But this season and beyond, I'm fully in on what Brock Bowers is. I think similar to what we talked about with McDaniel in LA, I think everybody on this team is going to get a Clint Kubiak bump. I expect vast improvement from the offense in general, considering his recent history. But also, I think it's pretty likely that they're going to play primarily out of 12 personnel. Again, talking about these like multi-tight end sets, I think that's going to be a theme of a lot of the teams that we talk about. But historically, throughout Bowers' career, he's played 90% of snaps in multi-tight end sets, as opposed to 75% of snaps in only one tight end sets. So if they're playing a majority or at least more multi-tight end sets, then he's going to be on the field a lot more. And if he's on the field a lot more, considering the target competition that is basically non-existent around him, he's going to get so much volume. So I'm loving that for this year. We also have a little bit of OL improvement, offensive line improvement with Colton Miller coming back healthy. Tyler Linderbaum gets signed. I think they also added some interior offensive line depth in the draft. So yeah, he's a guy in all formats that I'm looking to get, but in best ball specifically, he's my bet for tight end one. He's going significantly behind Trey McBride right now. I think they deserve to be going in a similar range. I'm not fading Trey McBride necessarily, but I would have him a little bit lower. But this kind of like early to mid second, I don't think is unreasonable for Bowers, but you can get him all the way at the back of the second and sometimes into the third in current best ball markets.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I had the same one. Just to add another one, I think Michael Mayer could also potentially be a buy or value in these formats. He's going to go way, way, way lower in best ball and might not even factor in unless you're in like super deep redraft leagues later in the year. But as like a last round pick, I think he's going to be pretty involved in this offense. We just talked about the fact that like their wide receiver core is almost nothing. Like it's what they brought in
About
Jalen
Jalen
Naylor,
Naylor
Trey Tucker,
and Deontay
like
Thornton and Jack Beck, I think is the core right now.
yeah, I'm not too worried about that. I think Michael Mayer is probably their second best receiving weapon. If they're playing a lot of 12 personnel, 13 personnel, he's also going to be on the field and get a lot of that same kind of bump that we talked about with Bowers. Um, and also, there's a little bit of contingent upside there if you were to see a Bowers injury. So again, this one is like a little bit less relevant just because he's so far down the board. But I think that he's worth paying attention to in all formats as well.
Absolutely.
And
And
then, yeah, do you want to lead us off with avoids?
yeah, there's a whole situation that I'm just kind of confused about. I just hated the landing spot for him, and I think he's only going to be a handcuff. It's Mike Washington, because I've seen
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of back and forth about him possibly being the change of pace back for this team. I don't really know how much I really believe that that's going to be the case. While I am, people are interested in Mike Washington because of the intangibles and what he showed at the combine. I don't know how much of that's going to translate over onto the NFL field. Also, him having like one of the highest, if not the highest, fumble rates in college. That's also just a big turnoff in terms of him being a change of pace guy for this team. I think that as long as Ashton Genty is healthy and that this team is rolling even a little bit better than they are last year, I don't really see him being a guy too much for this team this year.
Or in
Or
the
in the
coming
future.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, with Ashton Genty being as young as he is and as good as he is, it's tough to envision too much of a role. Just to kind of play devil's advocate, not that I'm like into Mike Washington at all, but Kubiak has talked about in press conferences leading into this year that he does want to incorporate multiple backs into this system, and of course you're going to do that. Like the true like 100% workhorse role in the NFL doesn't exist anymore. You're going to have guys come in as a change of pace and as breather backs. But I think that's probably the extent to which Mike Washington's going to see the field.
It doesn't exist unless you're Christian McCaffrey.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
But I could see that 100%. It's just, I don't know. I mean, in the past, we've seen him do this with running backs where he has, split things between them, even to the chagrin of, fantasy owners. But, I'm hoping this is not a situation like that, or at least I couldn't see that being a sustainable situation.
No, and the talent gap between these two is so vast. Like I was always in Kenneth Walker's camp when it came to that Seattle backfield, but I could at least understand it more to a point. If Mike Washington is getting, significant work, I'm going to be real mad.
Yeah, 100% agree.
All right, so then for my avoid, I'm going to switch over to the best ball perspective once again, and this is not from a dynasty perspective. But I think that Mendoza and Kirk Cousins are probably guys that you want to avoid when it comes to like redrafting best ball this year. We saw Clint Kubiak make Sam Darnold like a Super Bowl winning quarterback last year and the leader of a really, really productive offense. Even so, he finished as the QB 28 in fantasy points per game last year with only 13.8 points per game. And so I think that they could take drastic steps forward. This offensive environment could get better and the team could be pretty good. And they just won't be that viable of quarterback options for you. I fully understand wanting to invest in Mendoza in Dynasty, but if it's just a yearly format, I just don't really see it. And plus, there's also kind of the downside that, one or the other could take over at any point during the season. So you might not even get a full season out of one of them.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I'm in the camp that we're not going to see a full season out of either of them, and it's tough to say when Mendoza will get a shot, if he does get a shot, but it's a weird situation with those two for the moment. So I definitely agree with that. I see the long-term investment, like you said, though.
For sure. And I do expect Mendoza to see the field this year. I would be pretty surprised if he didn't, but I agree with you that like the timeline might be longer than some people expect.
Yeah.
All right. You want to go to the Chiefs?
Yeah, let's talk Chiefs.
Let's do Chiefs. Where do you want to go first?
Let's talk buys and let's talk wide receivers because I'm going back to what I feel like is a yearly buy for us because this guy does stupid stuff every year. But I'm looking at Rashee Rice
Yep.
because, again, this is a guy that his reputation has spoken a little bit too much for him in terms of, how people view him as a dynasty or a fantasy asset. I've seen a lot of Rashee Rice downplays as of late. People saying, he's not going to get a long-term extension because of his offseason behavior and whatnot. But I will say at the same time, we have never seen a full season of Rashee Rice next to Patrick Mahomes really at full strength. We still won't see that this year, most likely. I'm not sure if Patrick Mahomes is going to be there week one. The timeline's optimistic, but I'm not 100% sure. But I will say when these two are on the field, it's tough for me to not say that him and Rashee Rice aren't, combined like this
Hmm.
because he gets so hyper targeted. It's kind of crazy when those two are on the field, even with, Travis Kelce being there and the decline of Travis Kelce that has been. Xavier Worthy still hasn't really proven that he's a guy out there. And even with Kenneth Walker brought in, that really doesn't add too much in terms of target competition and how they're going to be running this offense. So I still think Rashee Rice is going to be closely tied to Patrick Mahomes. I think that eventually he may end up getting an extension as well. I'm not really in the pessimistic camp that he's not. At the end of the day, he didn't get suspended going into this year as well, so he is going to play starting this year. So I don't really see the downside of a Rashee Rice yet. I think he's someone that we keep plunging his value every year, but then when he gets out there on the field, we're like, whoa, why wasn't this guy a top 10 wide receiver? It's just because of off-field antics and really nothing more.
Yeah. No, I think I agree with you. I am curious, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot here for a second. Of the guys that are kind of in his immediate vicinity on keep trade cut ahead of him, who would you put below him?
Okay, so if we're looking right here, outside of maybe Roma Dunze, because I think he's going to have a great season going into this year, and Chris Olave is always pretty solid. I would honestly take him over a lot of the guys above him, probably going up to. It'd be tough for me to take George Pickens above him. I think George Pickens was amazing last year, but I would honestly rather have him on a team than say like Carnell Tate, Garrett Wilson, and even Nico Collins with just the target competition that is probably going to be over there this year as well. I mean, it's one of those. He's a guy who's going to be very targeted going into this season, and he always
Yeah.
has been very targeted.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree. I'm also like a little bit lower, at least for this year, on Carnell Tate.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think there's an argument for George Pickens. Like if you look at the splits with CeeDee Lamb healthy, he was, not elite, although, we'll see what year two brings. Tedero McMillan even like scares me a little bit just because of Carolina being tied to Bryce Young. So I could see it. I could see him definitely moving up a little bit for sure. For me, from the kind of this year perspective, I'm actually looking at Patrick Mahomes. He's all the way down at QB 12 this year. Like I feel like we've been doing this right where he's started to fade. It's been this way in Dynasty for a couple of years where he was the undisputed QB1 and highest value Dynasty asset for a long time. He fell off quite a bit, and then it kind of followed suit in redraft formats as well. But man, Matt Nagy's finally gone, dude. It's time.
Yeah.
Like, Matt Nagy's been holding them back. In his time with Matt Nagy, he averaged 18.5 fantasy points per game. In his career without him, 23.5. Like drastic difference. And maybe it's not going to be so stark. Maybe it's not going to be so night and day just because he's off the team. But like, I think it's well within the range of outcomes that it's possible. You mentioned that he may or may not start the season. I'm a little bit less concerned with the health. Obviously we're still monitoring it, but currently FanDuel has him as minus 700 to start in week one. And Andy Reid has already said that he's expecting him to participate in OTAs, which is months before the season.
Sheesh. Okay.
So things are looking good from a health perspective with his knee. I also think that with Kenneth Walker there and Eric Bieniemy, curious to see if you have anything to say about this.
We'll get there. We'll get there, buddy.
That I do think that there will be kind of a reinvigorated run game for this team, considering how awful it's been for the past handful of years. And I think that's good for Patrick Mahomes and just like making this offense less predictable down to down, but also just making it overall better and functioning better, keeping them on the field longer. I think it's going to make for more point scoring opportunities for this team and for Patrick Mahomes. And also, we'll see if this holds up. But currently, all of Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, and Travis Kelce are both healthy and not suspended. So
yeah, it's not too often we get that combination with those guys. So it's gonna be exciting to see for sure.
Yeah, I'm super excited, and I'm in on a lot of the Chiefs, but I'm in on Patrick Mahomes specifically this year. But let's move on to the other end of the spectrum. Who do you have for us in the avoids category?
You already kind of alluded to it. I've got Kenneth Walker in my cells going into this year.
Okay.
Not because I hate Kenneth Walker. I'm not going to say that he's going to be bad this season at all. I just think that right now, with all the hype, with the new team, with what is the new situation with Eric Bieniemy, I think his value is probably pumped up as much as it's ever going to be, especially going into the future. And Kenneth Walker's getting close to that running back age cliff as well.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but to add to your point, this has actually changed in recent days, so it might be like kind of leaning into what you're arguing. I think he was up in the RB9, RB8 category literally like yesterday or the day before, and he's just recently dropped down a little bit to RB11. Their overall point values are still pretty close, but just adding to your point, I think.
Absolutely. I think he's one of those guys. I think this season is going to be a good season for him. Like you said, this is somebody that they have been lacking the last few seasons, someone who can actually run the ball, competently. But I will say, one, Kenneth Walker, it's tough to keep him on the field. That's one. He has a tough time staying out there. And two, it's just, I don't think his value is ever going to be higher than it is right now. With just all the hype, with the unknown that it is with Kenneth Walker in Kansas City, even just having, like you said, finally having a guy who can run the ball, him just being that guy is going to pump up his value so much. And I think if you wanted to at least find some value, hey, if you're looking for those 2027 first, I think right now is the time to sell Kenneth Walker and try to go for those.
I'm trying to do that in that same league that I shipped off Brock Bowers.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that Kenneth Walker is going to have a good season, and you said that already. I don't think you're thinking the opposite. But I completely agree from the perspective that this is the highest value that he's ever been and probably will ever get to. And so if you've been holding on to Kenneth Walker and you've just been steadily seeing his value decline and decline and decline and feel like you're stuck with him, you finally have an out for premium value. So I completely agree with this one. I think that that's a very reasonable take. I had trouble from kind of a redraft best ball perspective trying to figure out who I was avoiding from this team. So I'm not super convicted in this take, but I think I settled on Travis Kelce. That's not Kelce. He's at the tight end 10 right now. And it's not even that I necessarily think the tight ends around him are better. Like Jake Ferguson, Dalton Kincaid don't scare me too much in terms of whether they're going to beat out Kelce. But when I get to this point in best ball drafts, I'm just typically focused on other positions. I'm way more into guys like Casey Concepcion going below him, Kyler Murray, Michael Pittman, even QJ, who we talked about. I didn't mention him necessarily when we were talking about the Chargers, but if he's that second wide receiver in two wide receiver sets, I think that he's going to be very productive this year. Wandale in the slot in Tennessee, I think could be pretty productive. So these guys going in this range around him, Josh Downs as well. I just prefer so many of the other guys in this value area that I tend to avoid Travis Kelce, even if it's not necessarily his fault specifically.
No, I 100% agree. I think, last year he was still pretty productive, but that was from a perspective of he was just getting force-fed targets because Rashee Rice wasn't there for a third of the season. And even when he got back, there was a pretty big decline in terms of Travis Kelce and how much he was targeted. It literally just plummeted as soon as Rashee Rice was inserted back into the offense. So, yeah, like you said, I'm not too afraid of the people behind him, but at the same time, I don't think he's going to be worth where he's going right now.
Completely agree. All right, let's move on to the last team on the list. That's going to be the Denver Broncos. Lead us off once again.
So the Denver Broncos, it's an ascending offense, so it's tough to decipher who the guys are here because it is kind of a weirder situation. But someone I've absolutely been looking at is just the new addition to the team, Jalen Waddle. I think he's going to be huge for this team just in terms of how they want to use him, just the different areas of the field that they can actually access now with him there and being the reliable target. a lot of intermediate to deep stuff just really wasn't available for this team because they didn't have guys who could consistently run those routes. It was Troy Franklin. They tried to make it him, but he just wasn't really efficient and he wasn't really consistent with getting it done. But I think with Jalen Waddle there, the field just opens up so much more. So he's someone I'm definitely looking into going into the season.
I completely agree across all formats. I would have been looking to buy him in Dynasty if I'm looking to compete, and I'm definitely looking to buy him or to take him in best ball drafts and potentially as we head into redraft season. Just to acknowledge it off the top because everybody's going to talk about it. Like, we know that he's had trouble staying on the field. We know that he loves the blue injury tent. That's his thing. But if he can stay healthy, I genuinely think he's set up to smash. For all of the reasons that you said, and hopefully I can add on to that a little bit. He's been one of the most efficient wide receivers in the entire NFL for his whole career. But now he's the clear best wide receiver on his team again for the first time since really his rookie year in Miami. And I think that's actually a huge deal. Like, typically I'm not one to overemphasize the importance of being the wide receiver one on your team. But in this case, I think it actually sets up for him specifically really, really well, because as the second option in Miami, I felt like his deployment was really static. They just kind of put him out there at the X for the vast majority of the time. And so he didn't get very creative usage, but as the primary guy in Denver, I fully suspect that he'll get moved around the formation more creatively, get a lot more like easy and manufactured touches. Also, I just think that the Broncos are a much better fantasy environment than the Dolphins have been the past couple years. And so more scoring opportunities, more volume, more creative usage for Waddle, I think leads me to believe that he has the upside outcome of being like a top 10 wide receiver this year.
Absolutely agree. I think that he's going to be a big piece for this offense. They've really been missing, honestly.
Yeah, no, I think he's going to unlock some stuff for them. And I just forgot to pull up his price in here so that you guys can see it. He's currently the wide receiver 24. Honestly, not too dissimilar from his dynasty price. But like I said, I think he has that potential to be a wide receiver one in fantasy scoring this year. And so to be able to take him at like back end wide receiver two prices, I think is a steal.
Absolutely.
All right. Who are you avoiding from this team?
I am avoiding any running back not named Jonah Coleman.
Okay.
And let me explain where I'm coming from there. If we're looking at J.K. Dobbins, he was brought back this year. They gave him a deal. J.K. Dobbins has played 9.4 games per season dating back to his rookie season. That's just me being honest. That's the facts. He hasn't played more than 13 games since literally his rookie season. He played 15 and that was it. So it's not really a stretch to say J.K. Dobbins has a hard time staying on the field at all times.
Yeah.
If we're looking at RJ Harvey, we saw an opportunity where J.K. Dobbins again was hurt and he got an opportunity to be the lead back and he got an opportunity to be elevated and he wasn't really able to do much with that. He wasn't consistent. He wasn't efficient. It just wasn't really good all around. Now enter a Jonah Coleman. I feel like he's brought in to be a part of this whole running back group that is going to end up being kind of a carousel. But if J.K. Dobbins, or in most cases when J.K. Dobbins were to get hurt, Jonah Coleman is going to take that role and sort of be that thunder to lightning combination for RJ Harvey. Now, RJ Harvey's going to get a lot of the passing downs work. I'm not going to say that he's not, but Jonah Coleman is actually no zero when it comes to passing downs at all. He's actually been used this past rookie minicamp. They've seen him catching passes out the backfield. It's something the team is aware that he is capable of doing as well with his game. So in terms of value, in terms of who is the cheapest in that backfield, but who also has the opportunity to take a lot of the work in that backfield, I'm looking at Jonah Coleman out of the three.
I like it. I like it a lot. The only reason I was surprised when you said the whole backfield is because, again, my brain is wired for the best ball perspective right now, and I kind of like Dobbins' price there. But from a dynasty perspective, I completely get it. And my avoid from all perspectives is also RJ Harvey.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, completely understand where you're coming from there. I'll switch over just so you guys can see the prices that we're referring to. Harvey is the RB28. And I like a lot of the running backs and honestly, like a lot of the players at all the positions going around where he's being drafted right now. But just to emphasize the things that you already touched on, I think you did a great job of talking about that running back group and as a whole. But But RJ Harvey was one of the least efficient runners in the NFL last year. He was 41st in missed tackles forced rate. He was 41st in breakaway run rate, 46th in explosive play rate, and 65th in adjusted yards per carry. They just re-signed J.K. Dobbins this offseason, which presumably to me means that he's going to maintain his role as the lead back and early down ball carrier. They drafted Jonah Coleman, who I think is a better in-between the tackles runner at least, and better in pass protection than RJ Harvey is. And he's not as dynamic in space as Harvey, but he is a capable receiver, which you touched on as well. So I think it's possible that he eats in at least a little bit to RJ Harvey's role there too. So he's really just stepping on RJ Harvey's toes in every sense. And then from a dynasty perspective, to kind of drive that home, which you already talked about, the bet on RJ Harvey was that he would play the receiving role and kind of consolidate all of that work with the upside to take a little bit of the rushing work from Dobbins and then next season be the guy. I think with Jonah Coleman here, it muddies that entire picture for this year and then also means he won't be the guy, the unquestioned guy in the future. So I just don't see why you would really make the bet on RJ Harvey right now in any format.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think even with that receiving role, he's going to be, a lot of short yardage stuff. Of course, the running back coming out the backfield. A lot of short yardage stuff is probably going to go to Cortland Sutton also.
It's fair.
Because he's not going to be forced to run those intermediate and, deep routes as much anymore. He can kind of be that short to intermediate guy as well now that, they do have a Jalen Waddle there who can handle a lot of the other work. I think things are going to get retooled a bit this season.
And I bet Waddle gets a lot of that work too. And the manufacture game, screen game, he can take off from that perspective too. So yeah, we might see a lot of areas of RJ Harvey's game kind of get taken away from him.
Yeah. Plus his Bo Nix throwing the ball, you know what I'm saying? He's going to go, he's going to go for that shorter stuff if he can get it. You know what I mean? So I think that's going to be huge, but they're all going to end up sort of cannibalizing each other a little bit.
Bro, that's exactly the way I wanted to end this video, with some Bo Nix hate. But I think that'll probably do it. Is there anybody else that you wanted to talk about in general from any of these teams?
No, that's all I got really in terms of the big guys.
That'll round us out. So I appreciate you guys for watching, as always. If you guys want to let us know some of your favorite targets and avoids from the AFC West or any of the divisions that we'll eventually get to, let us know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like on it, hit that sub button, and stay up to date with us by hitting that bell for the notifications in the future. But I think that'll probably do it for us. So we'll catch you in the next video. Peace.
Peace.